The lawyer's voice droned on as he read the will, but all I could hear was the blood rushing in my ears. 23 years old, and I was watching my entire family divide up my mother's fortune while I sat there, invisible as always. My stepfather Richard cleared his throat, adjusting his Italian silk tie, the one Mom bought him for their 5th anniversary. My stepsister Victoria smirked from across the mahogany conference table, her perfectly manicured nails tapping against her new inheritance papers. $7 million, that's what she was getting. Her brother James, another $7 million, plus the vacation homes in Aspen and Martha's Vineyard. And me? Elena Winters, the biological daughter who spent every summer, every holiday, every free moment caring for Mom during her 3-year battle with cancer? I got a dusty cardboard box of old perfume bottles. The room smelled like leather and disappointment. Outside the 42nd floor windows of the law firm, Manhattan stretched endlessly, a city of dreams that would never be mine. I kept my hands folded in my lap, my grandmother's voice echoing in my head from years ago. Dignity, Elena. No matter what they take from you, never let them take your dignity. If you're still watching this, maybe you understand what it feels like to be erased by the people who were supposed to love you. Maybe you know the particular sting of being deemed worthless by your own family. Stay with me, because what happened next changed everything. Though not in any way I could have imagined when I carried that pathetic box of perfumes out of that office, my eyes burning with unshed tears. The thing about being the invisible daughter is that you learn to see everything. I'd watched Richard slowly turn my mother against me over the years, whispering poison in her ear while I was at college, working 2 jobs to pay for the education they wouldn't fund. "Elena's so independent," he'd say, his voice dripping with false admiration. "She doesn't need our help like Victoria and James do. She's always been the strong one." Strong. That was their favorite word for me. Strong meant I didn't need money for textbooks. Strong meant I could work 16-hour shifts at the diner while Victoria posted Instagram photos from her semester in Paris. Strong meant I could sleep on a broken futon in a studio apartment with 3 roommates while James threw parties in his Manhattan penthouse, the one my mother bought him for his 21st birthday. But I was there when Mom needed someone. Every chemotherapy appointment, I held her hand while she vomited into those pink plastic basins. I was the one who shaved her head when her beautiful auburn hair started falling out in clumps, both of us crying and laughing as we made jokes about her looking like a rebellious teenager. I slept on that uncomfortable hospital chair for weeks at a time, reading her favorite Jane Austen novels aloud when the pain kept her awake at night. Where was Richard then? In his office, working late with his secretary, though Mom never knew about that. Where was Victoria? In Milan for Fashion Week, posting selfies with champagne glasses while I spoon-fed our mother ice chips. Where was James? Probably at another one of his yacht parties in the Hamptons, spending Mom's money before she was even gone. The day she died, I was the only one holding her hand. Her eyes, once so bright and full of life, found mine in those final moments. "Elena," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the beeping machines. "My sweet girl, I'm so sorry." I thought she was apologizing for leaving me. Now I wonder if she knew what was coming. The will reading was scheduled for exactly 1 month after the funeral. Richard's idea, of course. He wanted everything settled quickly, wanted to start his new life with Mom's fortune secured in his bank account. $20 million he got. $20 million, plus the house in Connecticut, the apartment in Paris, the art collection she'd spent decades curating. "To my stepdaughter Victoria," the lawyer had read in his monotone voice, "who has brought such joy and light into my life, I leave $7 million, my jewelry collection, and my shares in the Winters Foundation." Victoria had actually squealed like she'd won a game show prize instead of inherited money from a woman who died screaming in pain. "To my stepson James, who has shown such promise and ambition, I leave $7 million, the properties in Aspen and Martha's Vineyard, and my vintage car collection." James had high-fived his father, high-fived him, right there in the lawyer's office, while I sat frozen in my chair. And to my daughter Elena, the lawyer had paused here, glancing up at me with something that might have been pity, who has always been so capable and independent. I leave my collection of vintage perfumes with my hope that she will think of me whenever she wears them. The silence that followed was deafening. Then Victoria laughed, actually laughed, covering her mouth with her hand in fake embarrassment. "Oh my God, Elena, I'm so sorry. That's just... wow. Perfume?" Richard hadn't even tried to hide his satisfaction. "Your mother knew you never cared about material things, Elena. She wanted to give you something sentimental." Sentimental. While they divided up $40 million in assets, I got sentimental. The box was waiting for me in the corner of the conference room, covered in dust and sealed with yellowing tape. It looked like something you'd find in a forgotten storage unit, not a bequest from a mother to her daughter. I lifted it, it was heavier than I expected, and walked out of that office with my head held high, even as I heard Victoria's whispered comment to James. I mean, did she really think she was getting money after she basically abandoned Mom to go to that state school? Abandoned. I abandoned her by accepting a full scholarship to the only college I could afford, while they spent their trust funds on Ivy League degrees they never finished. The subway ride back to my apartment in Queens was a blur. I sat there with that box on my lap, watching Manhattan disappear into the distance, feeling like I was disappearing too. Every stop took me further from the life I'd grown up in, the life that had been ripped away from me piece by piece since Richard entered our lives when I was 13. My roommate Sophia was working her night shift at the hospital when I got home, which was a relief. I couldn't handle sympathy right now. Our apartment was a far cry from the Connecticut mansion where I'd grown up, water stains on the ceiling, a radiator that clanged like a ghost in chains, windows that didn't quite close all the way. But it was mine, paid for with my own money from double shifts at the diner and freelance writing gigs I did between studying for my master's degree. I set the box on our scratched coffee table and stared at it. Part of me wanted to throw it in the dumpster outside, to reject even this pathetic consolation prize. But these were Mom's things, probably the only pieces of her I'd ever have now that Richard controlled everything else. The tape came off easily, too easily, like it had been opened and resealed recently. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper that had gone yellow with age, were about 24 perfume bottles. They were beautiful, I had to admit. Crystal and colored glass in various shapes, some with atomizers that looked like they belonged in a museum. Chanel No. 5, Joy by Jean Patou, Shalimar by Guerlain, L'air du temps by Nina Ricci. Each one was vintage, probably from the 1950s or 60s, each one still sealed. I picked up a bottle of Mitsuko by Guerlain, remembering how Mom used to wear it to gallery openings. The bottle was perfect, not a chip or crack, the amber liquid inside catching the light from our one working lamp. These were probably worth something, I realized. Not millions, but maybe enough to pay off some of my student loans. The thought made me sick. Was I really going to have to sell my mother's perfume collection just to survive while her stepchildren bought new Ferraris? At the bottom of the box, wrapped in a separate piece of silk, was one bottle that looked different from the others. It was smaller, maybe 3 inches tall, made of what looked like solid gold rather than glass. There was no label, no brand name, just intricate engravings of roses and vines around the surface. It was heavy for its size and warm to the touch, which was strange given that it had been sitting in a cold box. I turned it over in my hands, looking for any identifying marks, and found something etched on the bottom in tiny script. For my darling Rosemary, may you find what was hidden. William, 1962. Rosemary was my grandmother's name. William was my grandfather, who died when my mother was just 5 years old. I'd never known either of them. Grandma Rosemary passed away when I was a baby, but Mom had talked about them sometimes, especially near the end, when the morphine made her nostalgic. "Your grandmother was a fascinating woman," she told me one night, her eyes glassy with medication. "She had secrets, things she never told anyone, not even me. But she loved puzzles, loved hiding things. She used to say that the best treasures were the ones you had to search for." I held the golden bottle up to the light. The liquid inside didn't look like perfume. It was too thick, too bright, almost luminescent. When I shook it gently, it moved like honey, slow and viscous, and I swear I saw it shimmer with its own light for just a moment. My phone buzzed with a text from Victoria. "Hope you're enjoying your perfume collection. James and I are flying to Cabo tomorrow to celebrate. Daddy's treating us to a week at the Four Seasons. Try not to be too jealous." I set the phone aside without responding and looked back at the golden bottle. There was something about it, something that made my skin tingle when I held it. The stopper was sealed with wax, dark red wax that had been stamped with a rose design. It looked like it had never been opened. I shouldn't have opened it. Any collector would tell you that vintage perfume is worth more sealed, that opening it destroys the value. But something made me reach for my kitchen knife, made me carefully score around the wax seal. It came away in one piece, and I set it aside, preserving it instinctively. The stopper was gold, too, shaped like a rosebud. It came out with a soft pop, and immediately the room filled with a scent I couldn't describe. Not floral, not sweet, something almost metallic but pleasant, like the smell of rain on summer stones, mixed with something ancient and valuable. I tilted the bottle carefully, expecting to dab a drop on my wrist like you would with any perfume. But what came out wasn't liquid at all. It was light, golden light that pooled in my palm like liquid sunshine, warm and impossible. I nearly dropped the bottle in shock, but the light didn't spill or dissipate. It clung to my skin, seeping in slowly, and where it touched, my hand began to glow with a soft golden sheen. Then the vision started. First, I saw my grandmother, young and beautiful, maybe 25 years old, standing in what looked like a bank vault. She was wearing a 1960s shift dress, her hair in a perfect beehive, and she was placing documents into a safety deposit box. Her hands were shaking, and she kept looking over her shoulder. The vision shifted, and I saw my grandfather, William, in what must have been his study. He was signing papers, stacks and stacks of papers, while another man, elderly with sharp eyes, watched from across the desk. "This must remain secret." "William," the elderly man said, "until the right time, until she's ready." Another shift, and I was watching my grandmother again, older now, maybe in her 40s. She was in our Connecticut house. I recognized the library, though it looked different, more alive somehow. She was showing my mother, who couldn't have been more than 15, the golden bottle. "This is yours, Lillian," Grandma Rosemary was saying. "But not yet. Not until you have a daughter of your own, one who proves herself worthy, not through greed, but through love. She must be tested, must show that she values heart over gold. Only then." My mother's young voice, petulant and dismissive. "Mom, you're being dramatic. It's just perfume." "No, darling," my grandmother replied, and her voice was sad. "It's everything." The vision shattered, and I was back in my queen's apartment, gasping, the golden bottle still in my hand. But something had changed. On my palm, where the light had touched, words were appearing as if written by an invisible hand. GPS coordinates, a date, tomorrow's date, and a time, 3 p.m. I grabbed my laptop and typed in the coordinates with shaking fingers. They led to a building in Lower Manhattan, in the financial district. When I searched the address, nothing came up. According to Google Maps, it was just an empty lot between two office buildings. But I knew, with a certainty I couldn't explain, that I had to go there. I didn't sleep that night. I sat at our tiny kitchen table, staring at the golden bottle, watching the liquid inside swirl and shimmer. Every so often, I thought I saw images in it, faces, places, fragments of something larger. I researched William Ashford, my grandfather, but found surprisingly little. He'd been a businessman of some kind, involved in imports and exports, but the details were vague. He'd died in a car accident in 1967, leaving my grandmother with my infant mother and, according to public records, very little else. But that didn't make sense. The Connecticut house alone was worth millions, and I knew my grandmother had never worked. Where had the money come from? Mom had always been vague about it, saying something about family investments and old money, but she'd never given specifics. As dawn broke over Queens, painting the sky the same gold as the liquid in the bottle, I made my decision. I called in sick to the diner, my first missed shift in 2 years, and put on my only decent outfit, a black dress I'd worn to Mom's funeral. If this was some elaborate prank by my family, some final humiliation, at least I'd face it with dignity. The subway ride into Manhattan felt different this time. Instead of feeling like I was traveling to another world where I didn't belong, I felt like I was being pulled by an invisible thread, drawn towards something that had been waiting for me all along. The golden residue on my palm had faded, but I could still feel it, warm and tingling, like a promise under my skin. The financial district was its usual chaos of suits and tourists, but when I reached the coordinates, I found myself standing in front of what looked like a narrow alley between 2 glass towers. There was no empty lot. Had Google Maps been wrong? The alley was barely wide enough for 2 people to pass, and it seemed to go back further than should have been possible given the buildings on either side. I checked my phone, 2:55 p.m. Whatever was supposed to happen, it would happen soon. At exactly 3 wow, the shadows in the alley shifted and I saw it. A door that hadn't been there before, or maybe had always been there but hidden somehow. It was old, much older than the buildings around it, made of dark wood with iron hinges that belonged to another century. There was no handle, just a small golden rose embossed in the center, exactly like the seal on the perfume bottle. I pressed my palm against the rose, the same palm where the golden light had seeped into my skin. The door clicked open. Inside was a narrow staircase leading down, lit by gas lamps that shouldn't have existed in a modern Manhattan building. The walls were stone, old stone, and the air smelled like that same indefinable scent from the bottle, rain and metal and age. I descended, my heels clicking on each step, counting as I went. 20 steps, 30, 40, we had to be below street level now, maybe below the subway tunnels. The staircase ended at another door, this one modern, steel with an electronic keypad. As I approached, the keypad lit up with a message. Please provide verification. I had no code, no key, nothing except... I pulled out the golden bottle. The moment it came near the keypad, the screen changed. Welcome, Elena Winters. We have been waiting. The door slid open silently, revealing a reception area that looked like it belonged in a luxury hotel, not in some secret underground chamber. Marble floors, leather chairs, fresh flowers on a mahogany desk. And behind that desk, an elderly woman with silver hair pulled into an elegant chignon, wearing a suit that probably cost more than I made in a year. Miss Winters, she said, standing with a warm smile. I'm Margaret Thornton. I've been the executor of your grandfather's trust for the past 40 years, waiting for this day. My grandfather's... What? She gestured to a chair. Please sit. There's a great deal to explain and not much time. Your family, your step-family, will realize soon enough that something has changed. I sat, clutching the golden bottle like a lifeline. I don't understand. My grandfather died when my mother was 5. He didn't have any money to leave. Margaret's smile was sad. That's what he wanted everyone to believe. William Ashford was one of the wealthiest men in America, Miss Winters. He built his fortune in secret, through channels that couldn't be traced, couldn't be taxed, couldn't be stolen. He saw what wealth did to families, how it corrupted and destroyed, so he hid it. She pulled out a leather folder, thick with documents. Your grandfather created a trust worth approximately $2.8 billion. It was to remain hidden, growing and waiting until a very specific condition was met. My heart stopped. What condition? The trust could only be claimed by a direct descendant who had been denied their rightful inheritance out of greed and cruelty, who had shown true love and sacrifice without expectation of reward, and who possessed the golden bottle, the key your grandmother was supposed to pass down. But my mother, your mother never knew. Rosemary tried to tell her, but Lillian had already been seduced by the obvious wealth, the visible fortune. She married Richard for his money, not realizing she was sitting on a fortune that dwarfed his entire net worth. Your grandmother died before she could explain, and the bottle was lost among your mother's things, forgotten. Margaret opened the folder, revealing document after document, deeds, bank accounts, investment portfolios. Your grandfather was brilliant, Miss Winters. He invested in technologies decades before they became mainstream. He bought land that's now worth hundreds of times what he paid, and it's all been waiting for you. This can't be real, I whispered, but even as I said it, I knew it was. The visions from the bottle, my grandmother's words, it all made sense now. There's more, Margaret said, her expression growing serious. The money your mother left to Richard and your step-siblings, it's gone. What? Your mother's fortune was built on loans, massive loans taken against properties and investments that were secretly owned by your grandfather's trust. The moment you opened that bottle, the moment you activated the trust, those loans were called in. Every property, every investment, every penny your mother thought she owned was actually borrowed against collateral that belongs to you now. I thought of Victoria's text about Cabo, about James's penthouse, about Richard's satisfied smile. They don't know yet? The banks are processing the paperwork as we speak. By tomorrow morning, they'll discover that every asset they thought they inherited is being seized. They'll be left with nothing, less than nothing actually. There are debts, significant debts that your mother accrued trying to maintain their lifestyle. I should have felt vindicated. I should have felt triumphant. But all I felt was a strange hollowness, like I was watching someone else's life unfold. Why did my grandfather do this? Why all the secrecy? Margaret leaned back in her chair. William Ashford grew up poor, Miss Winters, dirt poor. He built his fortune from nothing, and he watched as wealth destroyed every relationship he had. Friends became enemies, family became strangers, love became transaction. When he met your grandmother, he was already wealthy, but she didn't know. She fell in love with him when she thought he was just a struggling businessman. She pulled out an old photograph. My grandparents on their wedding day, both of them glowing with happiness. He never told her the full truth about his wealth. He gave her enough to live comfortably, but he hid the real fortune. He wanted his descendants to know struggle, to know sacrifice, to prove they could love without price tags attached. You did that, Miss Winters. Every night you spent in that hospital with your mother, every double shift you worked to pay for school, every humiliation you endured from your step-family, you proved that you are exactly who he hoped would inherit his legacy. But what am I supposed to do with $2.8 billion? The number didn't even feel real. Margaret smiled. Whatever you want. But if I might suggest, your grandfather left instructions, hopes rather than requirements. He believed that wealth should be used to lift others, not to elevate yourself above them. The companies he invested in, the properties he bought, they're all positioned to do good if managed correctly. Affordable housing developments waiting to be built, medical research facilities needing funding, scholarship programs ready to be endowed. She stood, walking to a wall that turned out to be a hidden panel. Behind it was a view I didn't expect. We were underwater. Through thick glass, I could see we were in some kind of underwater facility built into the East River. Fish swam by, oblivious to the impossible room hidden beneath New York City. This was your grandfather's private office, Margaret explained. He built it in 1965, his own secret sanctuary where he could work without the world watching. It's yours now, along with everything else. I stood and joined her at the window, watching a school of silver fish dart past. Richard is going to fight this. He'll say I manipulated my mother, that I forged documents, that— He can try, Margaret interrupted. But your grandfather's lawyers have been preparing for this moment for 60 years. Every document is ironclad, every provision legally bulletproof. Besides, Richard is about to have bigger problems than fighting you. The FBI has been very interested in some of his late-night work at the office. Your mother's death triggered an audit that's been revealing some very interesting discrepancies. I mean that Richard Winters has been embezzling from your mother's companies for years. She was too sick to notice, and you were too busy caring for her to check the books. But we've been watching. We've been documenting. The moment he tries to fight your inheritance, he'll find himself under federal investigation. My phone buzzed. Victoria again. OMG, Elena. Something weird is happening. Daddy's freaking out. The bank just called and said there's a problem with the accounts. He's screaming at lawyers. What did you do? I showed the message to Margaret, who chuckled. It begins. By tomorrow, they'll know everything. The question is, what do you want to do about it? I thought about Victoria's cruelty, James's indifference, Richard's manipulation. I thought about every birthday they celebrated while I worked double shifts, every vacation they took while I held my dying mother's hand, every moment of joy they stole from what should have been my family. Nothing, I said finally. I want to do absolutely nothing about them. Let them discover on their own what it feels like to have nothing, to be nothing in the eyes of the people they thought loved them. Margaret nodded approvingly. Your grandfather would be proud. Revenge, he always said, was just another form of attachment. Better to simply move forward and leave the past to bury itself. She handed me a card, black, with just a phone number in gold embossing. This is my direct line. Call me tomorrow and we'll begin the process of transferring everything into your name. For now, go home. Rest. Tomorrow, your new life begins. I left through the same impossible door, climbed the same gaslit stairs, emerged into the same alley that shouldn't have existed. But when I turned back, the door was gone, like it had never been there at all. Only the weight of the golden bottle in my bag proved that the last hour had been real. The subway ride back to Queens was surreal. I sat between a tired nurse and a construction worker, both of them probably making ends meet just like I'd been doing this morning, and I was now worth more than everyone in the entire subway car would make in 1,000 lifetimes. The thought made me dizzy. When I got home, Sophia was there, eating Chinese takeout in front of the TV. "You look weird," she said. "Did something happen with your family?" "You could say that," I replied, collapsing onto our salvaged couch. My phone rang. Richard. I let it go to voicemail. Then Victoria, then James, then numbers I didn't recognize. Lawyers, probably. They were panicking now, realizing their golden tickets were turning to ash. I turned off my phone and helped myself to some of Sophia's lo mein. "You want to talk about it?" she asked. "Tomorrow," I said. "Tomorrow I'll tell you everything." That night, I lay in my narrow bed in our cramped apartment, staring at the water stains on the ceiling, and thought about my mother. Had she known somehow? Had she hidden that bottle in the perfume collection deliberately, knowing that Richard would never let me have anything valuable, that he'd make sure I got only the worthless, sentimental items? Her last words echoed in my mind. "I'm so sorry." Maybe she was sorry for more than just leaving me. Maybe she was sorry for what she'd let them do to me, for the years of neglect and cruelty she'd enabled. Maybe, in her own way, she'd tried to make it right. The next morning came with a bombardment. My phone, when I finally turned it on, had 147 missed calls and twice as many texts. The messages from Victoria had evolved, from confusion to rage to desperation in the span of 12 hours. "Elena, what's happening? The bank says we owe them $50 million. This is your fault somehow. Daddy's having a heart attack. Please call me back. I'm sorry for laughing about the perfume. Elena, please. We're going to be homeless. I'll die if I have to get a job. This isn't fair. I didn't do anything wrong. You've always been jealous of us. Please, Elena, I'm begging you." James's messages were shorter, but no less desperate. The last one was just, "Name your price." As if I was the one who could be bought. I met Margaret at a law firm in Midtown, not the same one where the will was read, but one that was somehow even more impressive. The conference room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park, and the table was polished to such a shine I could see my reflection in it. "Your step-family has been busy," Margaret said, sliding a stack of papers across to me. 17 lawyers have already contacted us, claiming various forms of fraud and manipulation. One particularly creative fellow is arguing that the perfume bottle contained a hallucinogenic substance that caused your mother to change her will." I almost laughed. "What are we going to do?" "Nothing. Their claims have no merit, and more importantly, they have no money to pursue them." Richard's assets were frozen this morning when the FBI raided his office. Apparently, he's been running a rather impressive embezzlement scheme for the better part of a decade. Your mother's cancer was convenient for him. She was too sick to notice millions disappearing. "Millions of my grandfather's money," I said, the reality starting to sink in. "Technically, yours now. But don't worry, we'll recover most of it. Richard was sloppy, arrogant. He left a paper trail a mile wide." She pulled out another folder. "Now, let's discuss your immediate needs. I've taken the liberty of preparing several options for residences, since I assume you won't want to stay in Queens much longer." The photos she showed me were absurd. Penthouses, mansions, estates that looked like something out of a magazine. "This is too much," I said. "I don't need—" "Miss Winters," Margaret interrupted gently, "you're worth $2.8 billion. You could buy every apartment in your current building and it would be a rounding error. I'm not suggesting you become ostentatious, but perhaps something with working windows and reliable heat?" She had a point. We spent the next 3 hours going through the basics. Bank accounts, investment portfolios, the various properties my grandfather had acquired. There was so much more than I'd imagined. Office buildings in Manhattan, shopping centers in Los Angeles, tech companies that were now household names but had been startups when William invested. He'd been a genius, seeing potential where others saw nothing. "There's one more thing," Margaret said as we were finishing up. "Your grandfather left something else for you. Something that wasn't part of the trust. Something personal." She handed me an envelope, yellowed with age, with my name written on it in fountain pen. Inside was a letter, dated 1967, just weeks before my grandfather died. "To my granddaughter, whose name I do not yet know, if you are reading this, then you have proven yourself to be everything I hoped for. You have shown that love is not measured in dollars, that family is not determined by blood, and that true wealth comes from the heart. I never met you, but I know you. I know you because you are reading this letter, which means you endured hardship with grace. You chose love over greed. You sacrificed for someone who could not repay you. You are the granddaughter I dreamed of, the heir I prayed for. The money is not your inheritance. Your character is. The billions are just tools. Use them to build the world you want to see. Use them to lift others as you have been lifted. Use them to prove that wealth doesn't have to corrupt, that power doesn't have to isolate. Your grandmother never knew the full extent of what I built. I loved her too much to burden her with it. But I watched her raise your mother, watched your mother grow, and I knew that somewhere down the line, there would be you. Someone who would understand that the greatest fortune is not what you have, but what you give. Be brave, my dear one. Be generous, be kind, and know that somewhere your grandfather is proud of you. With all my love, William. I cried then, right there in that pristine conference room, tears falling onto the letter that connected me to a man I'd never met, but who had somehow known exactly who I would become. Margaret tactfully left me alone for a few minutes, returning with tea and a box of tissues. "He was a remarkable man," she said softly. I only knew him for a few years before he died, but he changed my life. I was a young lawyer, female in a male profession, struggling to be taken seriously. He hired me when no one else would, paid for me to get my master's degree, set up this entire firm just to manage his trust. He believed in investing in people, not just companies. What happened to him? Really? Margaret's expression darkened. The car accident wasn't an accident. We could never prove it. But there were people who suspected he had hidden wealth, people who wanted him to reveal it. He died rather than give them that satisfaction. He died to protect this legacy for you. The weight of that settled on my shoulders like a mantle. My grandfather had literally died to ensure this fortune would pass to someone worthy of it, and somehow that someone was me. I signed the papers, hundreds of them, each signature making me officially wealthier than most small countries. It felt unreal, like I was playing a role in someone else's story. But then I thought about what I could do with this money, the lives I could change, the good I could create, and it started to feel less like a burden and more like an opportunity. As I was leaving, Margaret handed me a key. "Your grandfather's apartment," she said. "He kept one, here in the city, that no one knew about. It's been maintained all these years, waiting. The address is on the tag." The address was on 5th Avenue, overlooking Central Park. Of course it was. I went there straight from the law firm, taking a taxi for the first time in years, because somehow taking the subway to my secret billionaire grandfather's apartment felt wrong. The building was pre-war, elegant in that understated way that whispered rather than shouted its wealth. The doorman knew my name before I said it. "Miss Winters, we've been expecting you. Please, allow me." The elevator was an antique, all brass and dark wood, with an operator who took me to the penthouse without my asking. The doors opened directly into the apartment, and I stepped into another world. It wasn't ostentatious. That was the first thing I noticed. Despite being massive, it had to be at least 6,000 square feet. It felt warm, lived in, loved. The furniture was classic but comfortable. The art was museum quality but not overwhelming. And the views. Manhattan stretched out in every direction, Central Park a carpet of green directly below. But it was the library that took my breath away. 2 stories of books, with a spiral staircase and rolling ladders, a fireplace big enough to stand in, and leather chairs that looked like they'd been waiting 60 years for someone to sit in them. On the mantel was a photograph. My grandparents, my mother as a baby, all of them laughing at something outside the frame. Next to it was another golden bottle, identical to the one in my bag. This one had a note attached, "For emergencies only. W." I picked it up, felt that same warm pulse of energy. Whatever was in these bottles, it wasn't perfume. It was something my grandfather had discovered or created, something that could reveal truth, unlock secrets, change lives. I set it carefully back on the mantel. One impossible revelation was enough for now. My phone rang. Victoria. I almost didn't answer, but something made me pick up. "Elena?" Her voice was small, scared, nothing like the confident sneer I was used to. "Elena, please don't hang up." "What do you want, Victoria?" "I'm at a homeless shelter." The words came out in a rush. They took everything. The apartment, the cars, even my jewelry. It was all bought with stolen money. Daddy's in federal custody. James fled to Switzerland, but they're extraditing him. I have nothing. I have literally nothing. The clothes I'm wearing are from a donation bin. I waited, saying nothing. "I know I was horrible to you," she continued, and I could hear her crying now. "I know I don't deserve your help, but I don't know what else to do. I've never had a job. I don't know how to do anything. I'm 26 years old and I don't even know how to make coffee because we always had staff. Please, Elena, I'm begging you." The old Elena, the one who had walked out of that will reading with a box of perfume, might have felt sympathy, might have helped. But standing in my grandfather's apartment, holding his legacy in my hands, I remembered every cruel word, every dismissive laugh, every moment of pain she had caused. "Victoria, I said calmly. "You're about to learn what I've known my whole life: how to survive on your own, how to work doubles to pay rent, how to choose between groceries and electricity, how to be nobody special, nobody important, just another person trying to make it through the day." "Elena, please, I'm not going to help you. Not because I can't, but because helping you would rob you of the only valuable thing you might ever gain, the knowledge of who you really are when everything else is stripped away. Maybe you'll surprise yourself. Maybe you'll discover you're capable of more than spending money and posting selfies, or maybe you'll crumble. Either way, it's your journey now." "This is cruel," she sobbed. "You have billions, and you're going to let me starve?" "No one starves in New York, Victoria. There are programs, shelters, food banks. You'll survive. Whether you thrive, that's up to you. But here's the difference between us. I earned every penny I ever had until yesterday. You never earned anything. So now's your chance. Prove you're more than Richard's daughter. Prove you're worth something without a trust fund." "I hate you," she whispered. "I know," I replied. "But someday, if you work hard enough, if you struggle enough, if you finally understand what it means to earn rather than take, you might thank me. Goodbye, Victoria." I hung up and blocked her number, then James's, then Richard's. That part of my life was over. The next few months were a whirlwind. I quietly left my job at the diner, though I set up $1 million fund for the staff. They'd been more family to me than my actual family. I finished my master's degree, then fully funded the entire department, ensuring that no student would ever have to work 3 jobs to afford their education like I had. I kept the Queen's apartment for exactly 1 week, just long enough to help Sophia find a new roommate. Then I told her the truth, showed her the bank statements, and offered to pay for her medical school. She fainted, actually fainted, then woke up crying and hitting me with a pillow for not telling her sooner. The charitable foundation I established was named after my grandparents, the William and Rosemary Foundation. Its mission was simple: to find people who were sacrificing for others and give them the resources to do even more good. The nurse who was working 3 jobs to pay for her mother's cancer treatment while volunteering at a free clinic, we paid off her loans and funded the clinic. The teacher who was buying school supplies with his own minimum wage salary. We renovated his entire school and gave him a lifetime budget for anything his students needed. Margaret helped me navigate the complexity of sudden wealth, teaching me how to spot opportunists and sycophants. They came out of the woodwork: distant relatives I'd never heard of, friends from elementary school who suddenly remembered how close we'd been, charities that were more interested in galas than good works. I learned to say no, learned to investigate, learned to trust my instincts. But the most satisfying part was what I did with Richard's former companies, the ones he'd been embezzling from, the ones that were rightfully mine. I restructured them entirely, turning the luxury real estate firm into affordable housing development, the high-end retail chain into a program that provided professional clothing for people trying to enter the workforce. Every business Richard had corrupted, I transformed into something that would help the very people he'd spent his life stepping on. 6 months after that will reading, I was sitting in my grandfather's library, my library now, when Margaret called. "I thought you should know," she said. "Victoria got a job." "Oh?" "She's working at a coffee shop in Brooklyn. Her manager says she's always on time, works hard, doesn't complain. She's living with 4 roommates in a tiny apartment, taking night classes to get her GED. Apparently she never actually graduated high school. Richard just bought her a diploma." "Good for her," I said, and I meant it. James was sentenced to 3 years for insider trading. Richard got 15 for embezzlement and fraud. They're both at minimum security, but still, prison is prison. And my mother's estate? After all the debts were paid, the lawsuit settled, the stolen funds recovered, nothing. They would have been bankrupt even without your grandfather's trust calling in those loans. Your mother, I'm sorry to say, was not the financial genius she thought she was. Richard was bleeding her dry, and she was letting him because she was too proud to admit she'd made a mistake marrying him. I thought about my mother, about the choices she'd made. the people she'd trusted. She wasn't perfect, I said, but she was still my mother. And in the end, maybe she did the best thing she could have done for me. She gave me nothing, which led to everything. Margaret laughed. Your grandfather would have loved that paradox. A year passed. I traveled, but not like Victoria used to, posting champagne selfies from yacht decks. I traveled to see the companies we were investing in, the communities we were helping build. I sat in boardrooms and shelters, hospitals and schools, learning how to use wealth as a tool rather than a weapon. I dated a few times, cautiously, using a fake last name and never mentioning the money. Most of the men were nice, but ultimately wrong. They wanted someone less complicated, less driven, less haunted by the responsibility of billions. One, a doctor named Michael, lasted 3 months before I told him the truth. He couldn't handle it, the idea that his girlfriend could buy the hospital where he worked. We parted amicably, but it hurt. Wealth, I was learning, was its own form of isolation. 2 years after the will reading, I was at a charity event, one of the few I attended, and only because it benefited children aging out of foster care, when I saw her. Victoria, serving champagne to the very people she used to party with. She was thinner, her designer clothes replaced with the standard catering uniform, but there was something different about her posture. She stood straighter, looked people in the eye. She saw me at the same moment I saw her. For a heartbeat, we just stared at each other across the ballroom. Then she walked over, tray balanced perfectly, a skill she'd clearly earned through practice. "Hello, Elena," she said quietly. "Victoria." "I won't bother you," she said quickly. "I just wanted to say, you were right. About everything. I was nothing without the money, less than nothing. But now," she gestured to herself, "the uniform, the tray. Now I'm something. It's not much, but I earned it. Every penny, every shift, every blister from these ridiculous catering shoes. I earned it." "How are you?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Tired," she laughed, and it was a real laugh, not the practiced tinkle she used to perform. "God, I'm so tired all the time, but also proud? Is that weird? I'm proud that I can pay my rent, that I can buy my own groceries, that my roommates actually like me because I'm not a total princess anymore. That's not weird at all." She shifted the tray to her other hand. "I heard about what you're doing with the money, the foundation, the housing projects, all of it. It's amazing, Elena, really. Thank you." "I should go," she said, glancing at her supervisor. "But Elena, I'm sorry for everything, for all of it. You deserved so much better from all of us." She walked away before I could respond, back to serving champagne to people who didn't see her, who would never see her as anything more than the help. But she was wrong. She was so much more now than she'd ever been as Richard's pampered daughter. That night, I had Margaret set up a scholarship fund in Victoria's name. Not for her, but for her to administer once she graduated from her night school. She'd learn about it eventually, when she was ready, when she'd proven to herself that she could make it without anyone's help. It would be her chance to help others, the way I could have helped her, but chose not to. 3 years passed. The foundation grew, the investments multiplied. The good we did expanded exponentially. I bought buildings and turned them into free clinics. I bought factories and converted them to fair-wage employers. I bought debt from predatory lenders and forgave it all. Every dollar my grandfather had hidden became a seed for something better. I learned to be comfortable with the wealth, to wear it like armor rather than chains. I learned to walk into rooms full of billionaires and feel no shame, no imposter syndrome, because I knew something they didn't. I knew what it was like to have nothing, and that made me understand the value of everything. Richard wrote me letters from prison, long rambling things about forgiveness and family and second chances. I had them returned, unopened. James sent messages through lawyers, offering information about more hidden assets in exchange for a reduced sentence. I declined. They had made their choices, and now they were living with the consequences. But the golden bottle, the mysterious liquid that had started it all, that remained a mystery. I'd had it analyzed by discreet laboratories, but they could find nothing unusual about it. Perfume, they all said. Vintage, valuable perfume, nothing more. Yet I knew better. The visions it had shown me were real. I'd verified every detail. The door it had revealed had been there, even if it only appeared when needed. The golden bottle was something beyond science, beyond explanation. It was my grandfather's final mystery, one I might never solve. 5 years after that will reading, I stood in the same conference room where I'd learned about the perfume, though now it had been converted into a community legal aid center. The leather chairs where Richard and Victoria and James had sat were now occupied by people getting free legal help for immigration cases, custody battles, tenant disputes. The mahogany table where I'd received my box of perfume now held files for people fighting against the exact kind of injustice my family had perpetrated. Margaret stood beside me, older now, but still elegant. "Your grandfather would be so proud," she said. "I hope so. No hoping required. You've done exactly what he dreamed. You've proven that wealth doesn't have to corrupt, that power can be used for good, that one person can change thousands of lives." My phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, then saw the preview. "It's Victoria. I graduated." Attached was a photo of her in a cap and gown, holding a diploma. A real one this time. She looked exhausted but radiant, surrounded by what must have been her roommates, all of them laughing. She'd done it. Without my help, without anyone's help, she'd rebuilt herself from nothing. I showed Margaret the photo. Should I respond? What does your gut tell you? My gut, the same instinct that had led me to open that golden bottle, told me it was time. I typed back, "Congratulations, I'm proud of you." Her response was immediate. "Thank you for everything, even for not helping, especially for not helping." That night, alone in my grandfather's apartment, my apartment, I sat in the library with both golden bottles, watching the liquid swirl in the firelight. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, from the girl who'd served coffee for tips to the woman who could buy the entire coffee chain. The money hadn't changed who I was, but it had revealed who I'd always been, someone who understood that true wealth wasn't measured in dollars, but in the lives you touched, the good you did, the love you shared, even when it cost you everything. I picked up one of the bottles, the one my grandfather had left for emergencies, and carefully opened it. The same golden light poured out, the same warmth spread across my skin, but this time the vision was different. I saw myself, older, maybe 60, standing in a room full of young people. They were all holding golden bottles, dozens of them, and I was teaching them something, showing them how to use the light. One of them looked familiar, Victoria's daughter perhaps, or maybe James's child, someone from the next generation who would need to learn these lessons all over again. Then I saw my grandfather, impossible as it was. He was standing beside me in that future vision, translucent but smiling, nodding his approval. "The legacy continues," he said, though his lips didn't move. "Not the money. That's just paper and numbers. The real legacy, the knowledge that love is the only wealth that matters, that sacrifice is the only investment that pays eternal dividends, that sometimes the greatest gift you can give someone is the chance to earn their own worth." The vision faded, but the warmth remained. I understood now. The golden bottles weren't just keys to hidden fortune. They were tests, measures of character, revealers of truth. And someday, when the time was right, I would pass them on to someone who needed to find their own hidden treasure, their own secret inheritance. But not yet. For now, there was work to do, lives to change, good to create from the ashes of my family's greed. Richard was wrong when he'd said I didn't care about material things. I cared deeply about them. I cared about transforming them from symbols of oppression into tools of liberation. Every building I bought and converted to affordable housing was a victory over the stepfather who'd tried to leave me homeless. Every scholarship I funded was a triumph over the step-siblings who'd mocked my state school education. Every life I changed was proof that my mother's death, painful as it was, had meaning. It had freed me to become who I was always meant to be. 10 years have passed now since that day in the lawyer's office. Richard died in prison last year, a heart attack brought on by the stress of losing everything. I paid for his funeral, made sure he had a decent burial, not for him, but for my mother, who had loved him despite his flaws. James was released early for good behavior and now works as a janitor in one of my buildings, though he doesn't know I own it. I've watched him on the security cameras sometimes, pushing his mop bucket down hallways he once would have. Strutted through. He seems smaller now, deflated, but also more real than he ever was as a rich man's son. Victoria and I have coffee sometimes. Not often, but enough. She runs a nonprofit now, teaching job skills to women leaving abusive relationships. The scholarship fund in her name has helped dozens of women escape situations like the one she found herself in when everything collapsed. She's married to a teacher, lives in a modest apartment in Queens, not far from where I used to live, and has a daughter named, of all things, Elena. Not after you, she assured me when she told me about the pregnancy. After the woman I became because of you. They're different people, you know. The Elena I knew growing up would have helped me, enabled me, let me stay weak. The Elena I know now loved me enough to let me fail, to let me fall, to let me learn to fly on my own. She was right. They were different people. The girl who'd walked out with that box of perfumes would have shared the wealth, would have tried to buy love and forgiveness and family harmony. The woman who'd emerged from that golden light understood that some things couldn't be bought. They had to be earned. The foundation now operates in 17 countries. We've built 342 schools, funded 1,147 full scholarships, provided clean water to 45 villages, and converted 89 abandoned buildings into community centers. The numbers matter, but not as much as the faces. The child who can read now, the mother who can work because we provide free childcare, the grandfather who can get his medications because we fund the clinic. My grandfather's fortune has doubled under my management, but more importantly, it's working. Every dollar is out there, creating jobs, funding research, backing entrepreneurs who have everything but opportunity. Money, I've learned, is like water. When it pools in one place, it stagnates and breeds corruption. When it flows, it brings life to everything it touches. I never married, though not for lack of opportunities. The few men who could handle my wealth couldn't handle my drive, and the ones who understood my mission were inevitably intimidated by the scale of it. I've made peace with that. Love for me isn't romantic. It's the look on a student's face when they realize college is possible, the tears of a parent who can finally afford their child's medical treatment, the dignity of a person getting their first real job at a living wage. Sometimes, late at night, I stand at the windows of my grandfather's apartment and look out over the city. I can see the buildings I own, the ones I've transformed, lights glowing in windows where families live because of decisions I made. I can see the park where the homeless shelter I funded serves dinner every night. I can see the hospital where the wing I endowed treats children regardless of their ability to pay. And sometimes, just sometimes, I swear I can feel my grandfather standing beside me, his ghostly hand on my shoulder, proud of what his hidden fortune has become. The money was never the inheritance. He was right about that. The inheritance was the chance to prove that power doesn't have to corrupt, that wealth can be a force for good, that one person with resources and resolve can change the world. The golden bottles sit in a safe now, waiting. I've made provisions in my will. They'll go to someone unexpected, someone overlooked, someone who will have to prove themselves worthy, just as I did. The lawyers have their instructions. Find the one who sacrifices without recognition, who loves without condition, who serves without reward. Give them the bottles and the mystery. Let them discover the truth for themselves. Because that's the secret my grandfather knew, the one he encoded in golden light and impossible visions. Wealth isn't about what you have, it's about what you do with it. And the greatest fortune of all is the chance to transform loss into purpose, pain into power, abandonment into abundance. They took the millions. I got a box of Mom's perfumes. And in that cosmic joke of an inheritance, I found everything. Not just money, but meaning. Not just wealth, but worth. Not just a fortune, but a future where every dollar is a seed. Every investment is hope, and every life touched is proof that sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's transformation. It's transcendence. It's taking the crumbs they left you and turning them into a feast that feeds the world. My name is Elena Winters. I was the forgotten daughter, the charity case, the afterthought who got nothing but perfume. And I wouldn't change a single moment of it, because every humiliation, every rejection, every moment of being unseen led me here, to this life where I can see everyone who's been overlooked and lift them up into the light. The golden bottle was never about the money. It was about learning that the only wealth that matters is the kind you give away. And in giving it away, in spreading it like seeds on fertile ground, I've become richer than my grandfather ever dreamed. Thank you for listening to my story. If this story moved you, and if you believe that everyone deserves to have their true worth seen, please cheered this video and shared it with someone who needs to hear this message. Comment below. And tell me, what was the moment in the story that resonated with you the most? And if you want more powerful stories about finding your strength and overcoming the odds, make sure to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what's next. End.